It is. It's really good to have you all along. For those of you that don't know, my name's Charlie Tuxworth. I've spent much of my career, I suppose, thinking differently about challenges and opportunities. And I suppose, for the record, first officially had innovation in my job title back in 2013. I'm the co-founder and chair of this group of Innovate Island. And Innovate Island was born from meetings that I had in coffee shops between other meetings in my corporate world when I was down in Dublin. So a few of us would meet up, people who had innovation in their job titles. I met them on LinkedIn, met them for a cup of coffee, swapped stories, shared challenges, aspirations, moaned a hell of a lot. And then we put the world to rights in terms of innovation, and we generally left on a real high. And it wasn't just all of the caffeine. It was really useful just to be able to have somewhere to share and to ask those stupid questions. We knew at the time there was plenty of support for startups, early stage companies, but there was very little for anybody who had that broader definition of innovation or was trying to put innovation into an established organization, for example. So eventually, this led to the creation of Innovate Island, where we are today, where we are a very non-commercial, strictly non-commercial, non-political, but influencing those in politics, and very open to all network. Our portal is a repository, and some of you will have been through the portal to get to this. Our portal is a repository for some really great content, some really good conversations, and it is a safe place to ask those all-important stupid questions and to seek advice and guidance and help. It's a good way of building capability and confidence to add value through innovation, transformation, change, thinking differently, whatever you want to call it. So if you are new, please do sign up, have a look around, and join in the conversations where you can. You'd be very welcome. So many of us have worked in corporate environments, and we know that the way that the executive teams operate, the way they do stuff, is absolutely central to the success of the organization. And it can be really hard to visualize how that approach could be changed or removed without really screwing things up. But when we look at our own lives, how many of us apply that kind of executive oversight thinking to our lives in this elusive search for that balance between work and life? Well, I met today's special guest, Carl Tishler, at the recent Reinvention Summit in Dublin. And over a number of cocktails, I think it's fair to say, I learned all about high-performing non-arseholes. And I have to stop myself every time I say that, because I did refer to it for a while as high-performing arseholes, which really wasn't the purpose of his mission, I guess. So high-performing non-arseholes is his term. I'm sure he will explain that shortly. But he uses a lot of ways, techniques, or introduces techniques that allow us to take care of ourselves by applying some learnings from those corporate models, I guess. I'm learning this today as much as the rest of you. Carl has got decades of experience as a chief people officer in high-performing, high-demanding environments across a wide range of sectors. And his approach to mentoring led him to creating the High-Performing Non-Arseholes Academy back in 2008. Yes, it really is a thing. And since then, he has worked with and helped high performers from around the world. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what Carl has to say. There's a good number of us on the call, so we'll hold off questions. When we get towards the end, put a hand up, and we'll bring people in, unless Carl overrules me and lets you in sooner, which is fine. So without much more ado, I will pass you over to the high-performing non-arsehole that is Carl Tishler. Carl, you're very, very welcome.
Well, that's kind. There's no chance of living up to that introduction. Let me just start by saying that. Yeah, no chance, except possibly the asshole part, but I'll leave you to figure that out. Thanks. I'm going to try and share my screen. There's probably a 93% probability I'm going to end up disconnecting all of us instead. So just going to try and just do that to share some slides to help just kind of shape the discussion a bit. Can you guys see that?
Yep, that's good. All good.
You see that? Okay, so hold on, let me just rearrange one thing. So first of all, thank you for the kind invite. I have to say, I I really, really loved being at the conference in Dublin. I mean, it's always a pleasure to be in Dublin, period. But I kind of felt like a bit of an anthropologist, dropped into this, big community of innovation people. And I think as we'll go on to discuss, I mean, I kind of fell in love with you all as a group. I'm saying that literally and carefully, not just to be for the avoidance of doubt, but and yeah, just a very high percentage of what we call high performing non-assholes here. And just to define that, someone who's driven and empathetic. That's like its simplest thing. Probably all come across lots of people who are driven and not empathetic, and the psychopaths and narcissists of the world don't need what we do here. But for people that are driven and empathetic, people that like to work in groups and can think bigger than themselves and that actually want to grow, that to me is what the definition of an HPNA is. Simply as that. Of course, it cuts across any other divides or definitions. It's that functionally. And I think the simple thing, which is really the topic of what we're talking about today, is that it's actually quite hard to be an HPNA. It's quite hard to be driven and empathetic. And it takes some effort to do that and to stay kind of in an operative zone, right, where we're not burnt out or any of the other occupational hazards that come with that. And the simple sort of solution or approach to it is this idea of stepping into this role of CEO of self that we're going to be talking about, after first just exploring the challenge. I'm going to try and leave you with 3 things that are takeaways that you can do. You can actually do them quite well if you wanted to form a little group of you within Innovate Ireland, or you can take it away and practice individually. But they're each things that kind of get to, as I'll go on to explain, that kind of get to the essence of trying to step into this role of executive management, that for whatever weird reason, and I have been doing this for 17 years, I don't know why we're not taught how to become this CEO of self. I do know that I've been to a lot of great mindfulness courses for 3 months and stuff, and I get to the end and nothing is operational. I'm sure it's my failing, but I do have this basic belief that things are either operational or they're kind of distracting and possibly destructive. So again, with these things I'm going to try and leave you with, they're meant to be operational, and they're meant, that sound too dramatic, to be kind of like rest of the life type actions. And the last just small thing on this area that many of us may have encountered, basically snake oil, of I'm going to change or overhaul our lives in one big way. I just think even whether it's snake oil or not snake oil, I just think big things don't work. And what I've learned, and what I'll try to share with you also, is that what does work are small, simple wins, small steps in this direction that we're going to be discussing, of trying to bring that professionalism that we have with our clients and bring it to ourselves, as Charlie said far more eloquently than I could. So I'm going to talk about the origins. It is a personal story on it, and then we'll go on to talk about the response to it, which is CEO of self. Pardon my language in advance. It gets a little fruitier as we get to the end of the week. But for me, things started. I was the shittiest university tennis player in the history of organized sport. I think I was okay sort of with skill, but I could never get my head around the mental game, really. And I mean, all things are relative, but it's quite a painful experience, actually. But it left me with 3 things that have impacted me, since. First is that just a sense of the importance of performance psychology, whether that's in sports or others. Secondly, and this is quite a fundamental thing, this idea that actually sustainable high performance is the top level, is the thing to aspire for. So all of us will know from our own works, we have these bursts of creativity and great work, et cetera. And then often, I mean, I hope not often, but often it's the case, we'll get burnt out and we're not there. But the thing I learned, it kind of was burned into my head, was that sustainable high performance is there. That is, being in a realm or a band of kind of operative activity and being able to perform, it was the key thing. And in short, I think that is the key objective for us as people, is steering into that range outside of tennis. A last quick thing was that you can't possibly understand like a tennis player, especially like a university player, without understanding what's happening in the rest of their lives. Like the person that shows up on court is 100% not distinct from the person the rest of the time. And that as a basic orientation of needing to understand the whole person if we're to actually really engage, and needing to understand ourselves, these were just like things that came out of this, what was otherwise quite a difficult experience. For me, since the time I was a little kid, I've only ever been interested in people and place. I'm just interested in people and how do we get together and stuff. I got to the end of university where I studied the decolonization of Africa and 17th century European history, super practical things on European history. And I got out and I literally said to myself, well, people in place, like that's interesting, but that's not a job. Like get a proper job. I'm actually ashamed to say that's literally how I thought. So I went and I worked on Wall Street for 10 years and experienced something that I've come to see happens quite a lot. We call it the curse of competence. I'll just illustrate it better by a story. I have a work colleague and friend of mine who is an excellent marketer. She's done it for 12 years. We're talking about her next steps and potential other jobs. And she says, well, but I am a marketer. And I said, well, what do you mean? She's like, I am a marketer. That's who I am. And I said, like, okay, so show me your birth certificate where it says that you're a marketer. You're someone who's competent, who wants to do well and is driven. And you've fallen one way or the other, you've fallen into a first career. And you've done well. And that's what the curse, ironically, of competence is. And you've never challenged yourself to think, not can I do this job, but do I want to do this job? Do I want to do it? I suffered from this really badly and kind of had the first 10 years of my career went and just, never examined this basic question of do we want to do it? It is like a company that just gets a product and it succeeds and never thinks about, is it a core competency? Is it something they want to do? It's something that, as I described, I started working in the academy with lawyers who are really prone to this. They can go an entire career without ever asking that question. And what I'm just trying to highlight with that is how easy it is, especially when we're succeeding, to just go on autopilot and to be happy with getting positive feedback. And that, where is the prompt to think otherwise? The only time you see it is if someone has a really disruptive career opportunity. But if you don't, you could just go for this time and you get this kind of warped sense, as my colleague did, of who they are. You're whatever you've done for your career, that's a deployment. That's a series of choices. That's not a identity, self-definitional thing. But this is something that, I fell into, and I see very, very often in people, as they go in career. So I then went to work in private equity. I'm not the brightest bulb out there. Let me start by saying that. It took me a long time to actually extract myself from finance. But I worked for this company that was a private equity company, and it went well, and then the world blew up, as you may remember, in 2008. And for me, I was actually like a particularly disruptive thing. I felt like I was literally in a snow globe. Firstly, our company went under and sunk like this ship here on the left. But it was over the course of a year, and it was like a slow motion train wreck. And I grew up in suburban Boston. My parents are happily married. I'm the type that would just like kind of trusted in institutions as a orientation. But this changed everything because I saw that the institutions that I trusted were totally fallible and actually had failed. And all of these things, the smartest people in the room, like, were not the smartest people in the room. And it was very, very disruptive. And I literally felt for that entire year, as I say, I was in this like snow globe, just starting to look at things independently. I mean, you would say, what, the scales have fallen from the eyes, something like that. But it literally was like that. And the main thing that I got focused on during that year is what we're talking about now, which is I saw all of these people around me who were, I considered ultra high performers. And, you know, when things are great, it's easy to look like you're in control and you've got your act together. But here, when the tide's gone out, you realized, and I realized, and I kept seeing it. I mean, it was like my brain was just on this one very narrow frequency that, of course, disruptive life events are hard. You know, we have a hard time of it. That's totally human, natural, important. But these people that I thought really had their act together, I saw that they had never really sort of prepared for challenges. They had never actually really ever been taking care of themselves in any way. And all of that was just kind of masked by things going well. And so the thing I slowly began to just look at, and like, as I started over that year, I started just, as I said, with the lawyers, others who've been disrupted. I just started spending time with people and focusing more and more on this just simple observation that we know as the cobbler's kids have no shoes, right? Which is these same people were super high performing, like vis-a-vis a client, for instance. I mean, the level of professionalism, the level of rigor, as Charlie was saying, was like super high. And I'm sure we all know that, like what it is when we're doing our best work. But that was always in service of an external client. But I was focused, again, like I was saying in tennis, like at the whole person. And this gap between, again, cobbler's kids, how well we are with external clients versus how crap we are with ourselves. I mean, again, I know we know it intuitively, but I just kept seeing it all the time in incredibly stark terms. And I just happened in that year to have, or to create, the time and space to make that actually my primary occupation, of this like intense curiosity of looking at it and trying to begin to understand it. And I saw a couple of things. I'd like to share 3 observations. The first, when I started looking at it, is that all of these good traits that we have, like, let's say, you know, taking ownership of a project, being responsible being responsive rather, being a constant learner, having high standards, being hardworking. Well, you know, I mean, what this, you know, non-scientific chart is just trying to say is that people who are high performing, as we all are here, I'm sure, you know, we're certainly well better than average on each of these things. And we pride ourselves on being better on each of these things. And that's great up to a point. Because unfortunately, each of these turn destructive if they're not managed. So being someone who says, I'm going to step in and take ownership of this project, well, look, that's great if it's appropriate, but that also is, you're gonna, you know, if it's not, you're going to be completely overwhelmed. You're going to take responsibility for things that you're not responsible for. And by the way, going back, as Charlie said, to the high performing assholes, like, you're going to be super prone to being manipulated. like no one is more easily manipulated than an HPNA. I'd still rather have a heart and the challenges and be easily manipulated than the alternative, but this happens. So, here we go. We're being responsive to our clients. Well, like when you've got, your 1-year-old in your arm at his birthday party and you're throwing him rugby style out so you can take a client call, like that's not constructive. I've never really seen people beat themselves up as badly as people who pride themselves on being constant learners when they're not learning at the moment. The harsh talk is just incredible on it. So high standards, we love high standards. Again, we pride ourselves on it. We tell ourselves correctly the story of that, but that is perfectionism. It's good traits gone bad if you're not managing them. And again, being hardworking is great, but then you burn out, and that's not great. And if you put that all together, you get to full burnout. So the first just observation was, this fact, these good traits turn bad without management, and there is no management a priori. There's none. The second thing is we make work decisions all the time, especially I imagine in your line of work, where we got to compare the potential cost versus the benefits. We have a lot of uncertainties, and so we make assumptions, and we state what our assumptions are. They can be challenged, but they're there. We are so good at doing that at work, and unfortunately, we're so phenomenally bad at doing that when we are the client. So human maths is just a concept of saying, if something impacts you as a person, literally it counts. It deserves to be considered. Cast your mind for a second to think about how many times, whether it's a work conversation that relates to you or a personal one where you say, oh, it's not important, it's just me. Don't worry. Well, worry. Because if something impacts you, it needs to be counted. It needs to be considered. If you want to make professional level decisions about and that impact your life, you have to have both parts of the equations. You have to be willing to make assumptions where they don't exist, and just like you do at work. So I'm going to just give you an example of this. I call it we work or you suffer. This is an actual example. I was talking to a woman who is the only representative in the UK of her company for the moment. And she was talking about working at home. And I said, I don't like, contrary to what you may think, I don't like lecturing people and I don't like generalizing. However, if I was going to do both of those, I would say that you working from home is destructive to your mental health. Period. It just is. And you could solve that materially, if not completely, by going to work at a WeWork. And what would it cost you? It would cost you $650 a month or whatever it is. But that's a solution that we can quantify. What we usually do, and by the way, on all these things, I'm not like looking for a lowest common denominator. On any of these things, if you say, well, I don't do that, like that makes me happy, right? Like I'm not looking to have a sort of shared, lowest common denominator. But what usually happens in situations like this is we don't even consider the other side of the equation. We just look at it and say $650 a month, too expensive. And what we're really saying is, we don't count. It doesn't matter. It's too much. And I would say every single one of those statements needs to be fundamentally challenged. And so one of the things that, again, the second observation was just how this was lacking in decisions was to begin to do both sides of the equation. So I like to start with a value of $41 million for our mental health. It's just a made up number, but just to start it. And so what we did in that is we would just work through and said, well, what do we think the impairment to our mental health could be from working at home? And do you know what? just like we do at work, we have to make a series of assumptions and put them out and make them clear. But the bottom line is when you do the work on that, this turned out to be an $11,300 a month problem. Well, like that's a complete no-brainer at work. But you see how far we are as our starting point from that, and from being able to make decisions that are professional style and that actually reflect and count the things that impact on us. None of us can afford to keep blowing that off and not counting it. Period, exclamation point. So this is a second observation. The third observation was like this, and I gotta tell you, in all these things, I am like the crash test dummy on them. But if you imagine waking up on the 2nd of January and saying, okay, I'm gonna overhaul my whole life. If I can do 5 hours of yoga in one studio with this one teacher every day, that will reset everything. That's an extreme example of a New Year's resolution, but I'm sure you know the type. So when we do those things, they follow a pretty predictable pattern, right? They start well-intentioned and energetic, and something disrupts them, and they fall off. And what I just want to point out about these things is that I believe they are triple negative or worse. And what I mean by that is, so obviously this example scoped the way it is, like that could never succeed. But the first simple thing is, when it doesn't work, is we don't have the benefit of, in this case, yoga. Secondly, we've made a bad failure. I've come 6.5 years working in a deep tech business as a startup. It's been the best thing for me in a lot of ways. I've come to love and respect failure when it's a good failure and it's constructive. This scope the way it was, like, that's just amateur. It's understandable, but it's amateur. And this is not a good failure. There's not a good takeaway from it. But the third thing, again, it kind of relates to the second, is that every time we try to boil the ocean and do something big like this, it doesn't succeed. It erodes a bit of our inner confidence that we have the competence to get things done for ourselves. Do you know what I mean? It's just a sense that is there. It's never usually stated, but there's a sense that it's been eroded, right? Because the most basic circuit in life is to start something, work on it, complete, reset. But here we've just not been able to get something done for ourselves. And on top of all of that, of these sorts of failures, is that the self-talk that goes with it, which again, we don't record. We're wired to think that if you want to be driven, you've got to, you can't be self-compassionate. You've got to be beating the shit out of ourselves. We have been taught, or we've imbued, or we've chosen to see and internalize that negative self-talk. Well, that's what you get for being driven. Well, no, I don't know, basically. But my point is, when these things happen, the amount of negative self-talk, I'm not a psychologist, but just as it gets into your conscious and your subconscious and rattles around, it's significant. So these just 3 areas over that year of just observing, quote unquote, high performers and just what life was actually like and the challenges really, really struck me. And, if you think about 3 areas of our lives, self-care, let's just call that mental and physical health, self-management, which let's say that's sort of like dealing with burnout, perfectionism, etc. And then long-term career management. Well, sure, we spend a lot of time, on those things, doing things on that. Yoga, I'm not trying to pick on yoga, but we spend time in those areas for sure. And we also spend time at a more meta level of thinking driven, thinking about things, etc. But the part that's missing, sorry to go back a step, and this was the thing I have to tell you, in that year, I just found the most astonishing thing, is that if you took any business, any company, and we got rid of SLT meetings and board meetings, like jokes aside, it would be a disaster. You can't possibly executively manage things without structure and cadence and regularity. We know that from work. We know that because, from all these other areas of our lives. But the weirdest thing from that year was just this simple observation that there's this layer of executive management that we don't have. We don't have regular personal board meetings. How the hell can we be executively managing ourselves if we don't have regular personal board meetings? How? What's the regular prompt for us? At work, it's easy. You want to do kung fu, it's easy. You want other things, it's easy because there's structure here. But for whatever weird reason, and I have to tell you, in 17 years, I don't know why it's the case that we're not taught this, but we have to have regular check-ins, just like any other thing, if we want to literally bring stability and executively management to our lives. I don't mean stability of outcome. We can't control what happens. But when we don't have executive self-management, which is our default, well, then when you start to think about it, most people do their best career thinking when they're in between jobs. I mean, how many of you would go to a CEO of a company and say, I think you should only think about strategy or innovation the moment before we go into bankruptcy? Or how many times, unfortunately, do we deal with health things when it's a crisis? Like, one of the reasons that we're doing that is because of the absence of a regular check-in that has these things on their agenda. And that, to me, is the crux of the real problem. And believe me, I'm a left-handed ADHD. I'm not a structure person, believe me, by nature. But the number one thing for that year, and the number one thing now that we focus on, is on starting to address these by introducing regular personal check-ins. And I mean regular, I'm talking rest of life regular, because what's missing is the facility, the faculty of doing this. That's what's missing. The decisions and everything else, well, that's up to you. This is not about giving you advice in these. You are the one best placed to do that. But this is about the necessary infrastructure that, for whatever weird reason, is missing and stops us from being able to have like a light, even just a light hand on the tiller on what happens. We were talking about satellites before. I may have gotten this one wrong. But you know the Dardanelles, anyone? Yeah. So strategically important. It's between the Med and the Black Sea. Very hard to navigate through if you had a ship 500-600 years ago, 1,000 years ago. That's a challenge. But the thing that we are operating, ourselves, our minds, our beings, I still think that's the most complicated thing in the universe at the moment. I mean, that is an unbelievably tricky and complex piece of machinery to do it. And as I said at the beginning, psychopaths, bless them, they don't have the same challenges that we do. The same things don't bother them that we do. But for HPNAs operating this super complex piece of machinery, this is meant to be the Dardanelles conceptually, boy, it is really, really, really hard, as I was talking about at the beginning with tennis, to kind of stay in this, what I call the high performance zone, which effectively, let's say, is like being healthy, for lack of a better word. So let's define it by what it's not. If we're sitting here massively burnt out, we are not in that high performance zone. If we're overwhelmed, if we're mired in perfectionism or manic, you are not in that zone. Similarly, if we, have low esteem or passive, as we tend to be massively passive about career management, even if we are successful. Whatever these things are, you're not in that zone. And so number one, it's hard to be in that zone and stay there. And number two is, over this, we talk about in the academy about careers being 60 years. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But over a long period of time, you've got a tricky area to navigate through. So when you step back and you really think about that, like, that's a big challenge. And again, this is not about telling any people what they want to do. Whatever you want to do in innovation, I know is the central thing for you. You want to make your time count. And the key to making your time count and having the impact you want is by trying to steer and stay in that zone of potential high performance as much as possible. I mean, that's, to me, that literally is like the name of the game. If there was a metric on it, it would be sort of percentage of time in that. We're human. No one stays in that zone all the time. We're constantly moving and crashing, but we're trying to steer our way through. But the one thing I can tell you about this is that trying to steer our way through as much as possible, to be human and high performing in that, is it will not happen by accident. It won't. I know we don't want to be active in it. I know it's not convenient. I know it's a lot of work. It's not easy. It would be great just to ignore it and hope that it happens on its own, but it won't. And the simple kind of answer to this, which is not a simple solution, but the simple response to it, is that the act, the practice, the discipline of trying to steer through that is, what we mean, or what I mean, when I talk about stepping into this role of being CEO of self. And I'm talking about.
Sorry to interrupt you, Carl. We've a hand up. How close are we to Q&A, or do you want to let Catherine in quickly?
Oh, sure. Catherine, go ahead.
Thanks, Carl. I'm really fascinated by this, and I just want to ask maybe perhaps an obvious question.
Sure.
But is there a difference or a gendered element to some of your findings?
My only gender difference is, I think it's a hell of a lot harder to be a professional woman than a man, as a general matter. I think, I'm
not sure I totally agree with you on that one, but I'm just wondering about in the sphere of things that are important, that traditionally women might have more of a network of people to talk to 100%. About, and men not, in terms of that self-management.
100%. That's yes. I'm thinking my response to that is really by recent discussions with students of mine about asking for higher pay and advocating for higher pay in a couple instances. I mean, my own organization is 100% women other than me. And yeah, it's an interesting discussion. I do think the similarities of experience, I think, kind of dwarf the differences, but I think there are differences. I think it's a great question.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, happy to discuss more. So okay, so being CEO of self, like for me, that's what I do. I did it internally in a company, putting everything into it. I can talk about that later. Okay, so how do you become CEO of self? So really simply, there's just one main thing, which is, and that I'm kind of begging you to take on the challenge, is a lifetime weekly habit of just checking in with yourself. And we're going to talk about how to do that, but I'm literally talking between 10 seconds and 5 minutes a week. So the stretch goal is not to have a long meeting or to do it. The stretch goal, as we're going to get into discuss, is trying to do it for the rest of your life on a weekly basis. And I'll try to unpack that, why that's the case. A second objective is of being CEO of self and the kind of work that we're doing is to actually end up being kinder to yourself than we are before. A lot of HPNAs, I can see them like sort of throw up in their mouth at the idea of being kinder. Oh no, I got to be driven, but that's like an outcome of it. An outcome, and it just kind of makes sense, I think, given what we're talking about. It's like if you begin to take better care of yourself, if you begin to quantify things that are bothering you, you're doing a lot to kind of reduce negatives in your life. And the net effect of reducing negatives is actually end up being kinder to yourself. And that's a very specific, I know it sounds like a bit of an airy thing, but that's a specific thing that I'm, that to me is an outcome. Right, 60 years, just imagine the goal here is to have a weekly check-in. The reason we have a 10-second version of this, that's one of the three things I'd like you to take away, is that life is demanding. We're always busy. We're always not having enough time, and that's even if, we just have a lot of competing things. The missing thing in our life is this moment or moments of regular self-management that don't happen on their own, and they need to be imposed on it. And so the most basic action, the thing that characterizes a person most fundamentally as a CEO of self, is being able to take a week, every week, but being realistic about it, and at least pausing for 10 seconds or 5 minutes just to do a personal check-in, even if you don't do anything except pause. It is the constant effort to do something that is directionally about you and self-management, and that requires stopping the rest of the world. That at its most basic level is the most important thing. I think it probably takes 6 to 9 months to have that really settle in. That's why, like on the Academy, our courses are a year long for that reason. You got to just kind of trust me. I know it seems like a simple thing, etc. It honestly is a very transformative thing. And we'll talk about how you can do that and be supported in that in a second. But this is the number one thing that characterizes it. And again, when you think about it in work terms, again, it's just like the SLT meetings are every week, period. They are. Some weeks are busy, some aren't, but the SLT meeting always happens. I'm going to skip this to say it, but the basic idea here, what I'm just trying to say is, with the same garden, checking in on yourself regularly makes a huge difference. People will come to me and say, oh, I'm so burnt out. Do you have a tool for being burnt out? I'm like, no, because you're totally fried now. 5 months ago, when you started to see this as a concern because you were having irregular meetings, then we can do something about it. And it's just like it genuinely is the case, even on things that seem very big, that just a regularity of check-in. You all are so skilled in what you do professionally. I'm just begging you to take that and harness that, even in a simple way, in consistent service of yourself. The second thing that we do, I'm saying this unfortunately on the back of having lost someone in the last 5 weeks to suicide. So this topic of keeping perspective is very kind of raw. But one of the other things that being CEO of self is about constantly training and forcing yourself to have perspective. So we teach career as a 60-year block of time. That doesn't mean you have to work for 60 years, but it's like a period of time where your basic job as a CEO of self is to allocate and navigate your time. The greater intentionality we bring to that, which is the opposite of passivity, the more we look at things constantly in terms of our overall perspective, the healthier we are. So this is a little exercise we do. I'm very happy to share this. You could do this yourselves, but what this shows is, I've worked for 32 years. There's a lot of things in my life that are making me think, well, hey, it's the end of your career, et cetera. Well, but it's not. I mean, health permitting, right? In golf, we'd say there's a back nine to play. This is just an example of structuring perspective into your career. Simple things that take us away from being short-term and negatively biased like we are, is perspective. That's the second critical element of being a CEO of self. We talked a little bit about this, about self-compassion. We have a lot of ex-athletes by chance in the academy, and it's always helpful for them to talk about how they respond from mistakes. And, they've dropped a ball or something at a critical time. If they responded to setbacks the way we respond to setbacks, that would be the end of their career right there on the spot. The ability to be self-compassionate, that is not a weakness. It's the opposite. That is a performance element. And it's this low esteem that we have in this warped way that makes us think that self-compassion somehow is this negative thing. And that's the third element. It's a constant struggle on this, is to say that, being kind, giving yourself a break, that's not being lazy or low performing. It's actually being high performing. So that's a third element of kind of what it looks like, what the components are to being CEO of self. We talked about reducing negatives before, and the areas that we talk about, you would want to be trained in how to do that weekly habit. We call it the CEO habit. The tools, again, I'm happy to share for addressing situations, and then again, tools for how we think about 60-year career. The whole point of a CEO of self, and it goes back to the curse of competence slightly, is if you're a CEO of self, you have and you want to retain agency. Anything that is taking that away from you, any sentence that has the word should in it generally, and should specifically about career, you have to laser focus on that, because that's stealing agency from you. And the thing we've found over the 17 years of trying to help people become CEO of self is that your chances of actually making that change are massively increased if you're doing things as part of a community like you are, if you have coherence and continuity, and a bit of accountability. I'm going to go on to explain what I mean by that specifically. The first thing I would challenge you.
Sorry, Carl, I'm conscious we have about 8 minutes left. Is there much more that you would like to get through, or would now be a good opportunity to just give a bit of a chance for people to ask some questions and so on?
Sure. What I'll do is I will, let's do that by all means. I am happy to, just on the sort of specific things you can take away, I'm happy to record a video for you on that, so you've got that as homework if you like.
Yeah, I'm conscious you were just about to start on one of the takeaways there when I interrupted you. So if there's no hands up, we can show that, but if there's a hand up, I want to just give people an opportunity. Don't see anything at the moment. Do you want to do the Beth Tishler?
Sure. Okay, actually I want to do something. I'll send you a separate video on this okay. Weekly challenge. My point, the reason I'm focused on it is that because you have a group that's together, you are particularly well positioned with a little bit of guidance free to make this happen. And I would love to come back in 6 and 12 months of you doing this and being told I told you so, but you know what I mean? I think you can really have it be beneficial. My mother worked in nonprofits her whole life. Her basic advice to me, literally for 45 years, was when something positive happens to us, we blow it off. Something negative happens, we obsess about it. We make a mistake, we obsess about it. So this very simple tool called the Beth Tishler file is as simple as this. You train yourself so that whenever you get anything positive, anything, you don't think about it, you don't filter it, you don't judge it, you automatically screen share, grab it and send it to a single repository, a single place. For my sins, I use Evernote still. I think I'm the only person in the world that does. But it's got to go to one place. And then every quarter or so, you go and you look at it. For every reason that might be going through your head now to say, that's stupid, that's a waste, that's cheesy, I couldn't disagree with you more strongly on all of those accounts. I can't make you do it, but I would tell you that the benefit of doing that is massive. And what happens is these things accumulate. And at any periodicity, having an objective record of things that are positive is hugely important. It's like I really believe it's like a necessary tool to help us along the way. It's not going to change your career or those things like that, but it has a very, very high value, important thing. And I would honestly kind of beg you to just trust me on it and start doing it. It is the tool everyone in the academy ends up thinking is the highest impact. The last quick thing I'll say is get rid of the word should. Totally. It's shame plus could, just get rid of it. Those two things, in their own small way, honestly can move the needle for you. They won't boil the ocean, but they can move the needle. And I'll drop you a note about the other one as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Carl, for that. Really appreciate it. And sorry for cutting in there. I wanted to give the opportunity. I don't know if I should be concerned that so much of that resonated, or the number of nodding heads that there were when you were going through those various points. I think it's obviously something we can all very, very kind of closely relate to. I think we've all been there. Do we have any questions or comments? Anybody want to just take the floor for a minute or two or feedback or ask something?
Carl, I don't really want to ask, but that was very insightful. Thank you. And yeah, I think it does. You've basically illustrated why we should be checking in on ourselves. It's as simple as that. Like, I think we all know it. It's getting into the habit and keeping it going, So, but yeah, I like your mother's filing system.
Yeah.
I think we all could do with that. Like you just resonate. That point says like we really do obsess more on failures and just onto the next thing once there's something positive, and just don't necessarily, give it, I suppose, the positivity within our own heads that it deserves. It's as if actually, my wife keeps like to me, you're always on to the next thing, this sort of stuff,
Yeah. So I mean, again, not to harp on this, but at an extreme, it's the loss of perspective, and the loss of something that's objective standards, objective things. It's the absence of those that can be so damaging. That's why those things are so disproportionately important.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that. Emerson, you got in there quickly.
Yes, this was very insightful. Actually, I've been doing some reading recently where they spoke about doing a daily check-in according to the environment that you're in. And I really look forward to seeing the video that you send, because I want to learn of the other tools that you're going to get into in terms of keeping that daily file of anything that's positive, and that you review every quarter. So thank you for your presentation.
Pleasure.
Great stuff. Thank you. Murray.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Actually, sorry, I'm next year. It was only to echo what Carl was saying. I've been facilitating some change workshops in Asia over the last couple of years, and we sort of landed on almost a bit of an appreciation activity, what we thought was a sort of short warm-up, and eventually quickly became obvious that it was a full-blown activity where we just asked people to share, you know, what would they consider a success in the last 6 to 12 months, personal or professional, individual or team, and the depth and quality of conversations that triggered within the teams that we were working with was breathtaking. And everything from a woman who had got her 17-year-old autistic son to read a book for the first time, to, you know, someone who had cleared a project blockage that had been kicking around for 9 months, to a guy who had finally got his mother into a care home that had destroyed his family in the process. Like something as simple as that, and I think there's just a craving for it, and there's power in it. So it was a great share, and it wasn't the Philippines actually. So it was interesting your Manila connection there, Carl. But it really worked, and people really felt it authentic and valuable.
Great stuff. Thank you. Eric, very, very quickly. I know your hand was up, but it went down again, so I moved on.
Yeah, no, I don't. My hand keeps going up and down for some reason. I don't know if it's over again. No, very insightful. Kind of went through a similar process when I realized that going through interviews and they ask you to give example of like where your success were, and you tend not to track those, and you think, oh yeah, you start thinking and kind of and going through that process, kind of coming out of the other end really helped, and kind of in a way helped me land where I am now. So yeah, no, very insightful.
Great stuff. Thank you. Thanks. Owen, did you want to come in there? Your hand was waving for a minute.
Yeah, Brian, are you still with us? Can you tell us about June the 20th before we go?
Sorry, I had to refresh my mind there. So I think the next event is, so I've been participating in the Central Bank of Ireland's inaugural Sandbox program at the moment. So I've asked the guy who's leading it, Dave Tighe, in the Central Bank, their innovation hub and innovation lead. He's going to come in and basically just go around reflections around what they've learned from an innovation hub perspective, looking at it from a regulatory perspective, which is totally different. So it'll definitely just be a different spin on things. It's the first of what they're doing, but obviously a big emphasis on collaboration between different stakeholders within the team of the Sandbox was combating financial fraud. So hopefully we'll see a few of you there. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, we're a minute over and we have strict rules. So I just want to say thank you, Carl, so much for taking the time today. I mean, as you said, we use techniques. We with our clients, we always get them to stop, take a breath, and come at things from a new perspective. But as you said, it can't be that hard to do it to ourselves, surely. If we actually do it, I don't know, that's a sweeping generalization, but as you say, I think it's that taking time, regardless. You can have all the techniques in your toolbox that you want, but if you don't take the time, then they're all for nothing. So that was one of the many big takeaways from your session. So I just want to say thanks ever so much for everybody coming along. Thank you especially to Carl. We need to keep this conversation going somehow within the community or outside of it. It was incredibly valuable and interesting. So thank you very much indeed.